Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and I'm very excited right now because we are going to be talking about Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, one of my highest, most anticipated movies of this summer, but one that also brought a lot of apprehension, obviously, because of the shoes that it would have to fill with Mad Max Fury Road. And we'll talk about that in a sec. This is part of an ongoing series of reviews where I'm doing summer movie catch up for a lot of the movies I haven't reviewed yet on this channel. And this is one that I'm sure a lot of people wanted to hear me talk about. And I'm sad to say that I really don't have a ton to criticize about this film, that this review is probably not going to be very long, but I think there's also something nice to just be able to sit back, relax, enjoy a summer blockbuster, think that was really awesome, that was really badass, go about your day, and then just kind of be content with that. And I think with so many different, franchise films especially that come out, there's so many polarizing responses on both ends where you either have to love this thing, or you really hate this thing and you're really passionate about why you don't like it and why you don't see the other side. And, we've seen so many movies this summer that are like that, Deadpool and Wolverine and Alien Romulus, but it's refreshing to kind of have a blockbuster that's pretty universally liked as something like Furiosa. And this film does have its detractors, and this film does also have its really, really heavy, hardcore champions, but I think it's one of those action blockbusters that because, Fury Road came out and because it was such a success and they were able to really kind of analyze that and see what worked the best from Fury Road, they were able to really incorporate that into Furiosa to see what would really stick with the fans and what would make people really excited to return to this world. And I think the world is the first thing I want to hit on here because this is a very visual partner with Mad Max Fury Road. If you look at the other Mad Max movies, those films don't really feel very similar to Fury Road. Fury Road was kind of its own distinct, unique anomaly of a thing. It's actually one of those films that I got into the franchise from Fury Road, and that's very rare where you'll just jump into a franchise on the fourth film. You usually want to see the first three before you see the fourth one, but it was such a singular, unique, just amazing little magnum opus action blockbuster that didn't really require a lot of previous knowledge. I mean, it probably helped to have seen the other three films, and spoiler alert, I still haven't even seen those three films. I've only seen Fury Road and now Furiosa, but I think there's also something refreshing about that. The fact that Fury Road was such a breakout that they really didn't have to feel like they married anything to the first three movies, and they were able to kind of start fresh right here, right now. And this is actually a film that was kind of conceived at the same time as Fury Road. This was going to be kind of like a dual production type deal, but I think Mad Max Fury Road, because it was such a big swing and such a different pivot, and because the Mad Max series as a whole wasn't on the level of Star Wars or Jurassic Park, not these big marquee franchises, I think he kind of had to pick one, roll with it, and he went with Fury Road. George Miller, who is one of our finest directors, one of our most versatile directors. I mean, he made Happy Feet, Dancing Penguins animation. He made Babe Pig in the City, a family film. He made 3,000 Years of Longing, which is a very spiritual, kind of very heady, kind of ambitious fantasy film. I mean, he is kind of covered so much ground as a filmmaker, but he made Fury Road, and with this big abashed love and response for it, was then able to make this follow-up, which is actually really a prequel to Fury Road. It really chronicles Furiosa's road to get to Fury Road, the road to Fury Road, if you will, kind of chronicling her childhood with her mother, and then how she gets kind of kidnapped and forced to work for this warlord Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth, who is a great performance of his, and her ascension to then becoming Imperator Furiosa that we know from the Mad Max Fury Road movie. It's a very basic kind of 3-act, origin story, revenge picture, even though I think it's a little bit more than 3 acts. They break it up in 4 or 5 chapters, but it does kind of chronicle, very young Furiosa, kind of the middle Furiosa where she's figuring it out, and then when she finally takes that final stand. It's a really great, just classic epic in the way you would expect any kind of Western revenge flick to kind of play out. And that's what's so interesting, is that the world, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, the world is so familiar because it's all the same kind of imagery and same vibes as Fury Road in terms of the visuals. It feels like it exists in that world. And I think that was a big selling point of this film. It's not just the Mad Max you love, it's the Fury Road that you love. That whole world, the way you're able to just sink into those those deep yellow colors and the textures of the sand and all that stuff. The heat that just emanates off the frames, even if you can't necessarily feel it, even if you're not in 4DX, you can still feel that heat somehow through the celluloid. That kind of vibe is what makes Mad Max Fury Road so special, and I think they brought a lot of that to this film as well. But what I like so much about Furiosa is that tonally and thematically and pacing wise, it could not be any more different from Fury Road, because this is telling more of that slow building Western kind of revenge picture where everything really takes its time and there's a real gradual build. And yes, there are action sequences that then kind of amp up the energy to 11. But the thing with Mad Max Fury Road is that it's 11 from start to finish, and there's like maybe a few scenes where it kind of cools off and has some really introspective, amazing character moments. This is kind of the opposite, where it's all introspective character stuff, and then one or two times it'll really just jolt you with the energy that you would expect from Fury Road. I actually thought that was very refreshing. I think for a follow up to a film that is already so perfect, that people think is one of the greatest films of all time, not just action films, but like films of all time, I think there was a very big set of shoes to fill. And of course, George Miller's coming back. So you have that confidence of the filmmaker just having complete control. But there's also that danger of like, how do we live up to something so perfect without imitating it and making it feel like a cheap knockoff? And I think because this was conceived at the same time as Fury Road, I think they already kind of established their own ideas and what they were going to tell in this story that was so separate from Fury Road while also still staying true to the character. So I think thematically, they really had it from the start, how they were going to have this divide between Fury Road and Furiosa. But I think the visuals is what keeps them all connected and what makes it feel like you could watch this in tandem and really feel like you have this whole complete story, even if the energy is different between films, which I really appreciated. And I know there's always questions of fan service and when is it too much? When is it not enough? When is fan service welcome? When is it not? And I think because this is a prequel, they didn't necessarily need to do a lot of Fury Road callbacks because this all happened before. And I actually think the only big negative, I mean, I have a few little negative nitpicks, but I think the one huge negative is that at the very end in the credits, they literally play like a clip show of Fury Road. And I think that's the only problem with this film is that it's great, but I think it's always living in that shadow of Fury Road. And because it looks so similar, you're always going to be constantly kind of comparing it in your head, even though they are very different films. And I think by the end, I was sold. Like, this is its own thing, and I like it a lot. And while it's set in this universe, I think it is its own unique kind of tone and story in this universe. And then at the very end, they're like, oh, but we're going to show you all Fury Road to remind you that you still like that film more. And it's like, like you kind of pulled the rug out from under us. And I wish they had almost kind of left the credits alone, just kind of showed us the names and let us go about our days, because I think it does such a good job distinguishing itself as its own thing, only to then remind us of the thing we love a little bit more. It'd be like if you ate like the best scoop of vanilla ice cream and you're like, oh, this is so good. And then someone pulled out an ice cream sundae afterwards and they're like, oh, but you also like it with all the hot fudge and whipped cream and cherry. And you're like, yeah, but this scoop of vanilla was really great. Like, you don't need to show me all the toppings. I liked it as much as I could, like I just think that was the one huge thing. And I think that's a studio thing. It's got to be a studio thing. Like, oh, we got to really sell it. We got to, put Fury Road in the credits. But the problem is they've already sat through the movie. They've already bought the tickets. You're not selling anything. All you're selling is them to go like buy the Blu-ray of Fury Road, which I assume if you're a big fan, and I'm a big advocate for physical media, you probably own. And if you don't own it, you should go buy it. It's great. But I do think it's one of those things where, when a film does not quite live up entirely to a masterpiece's shoes, don't remind us of that masterpiece. Don't show us clips of the masterpiece, because then it's going to look worse in comparison. And that was like my big qualm. But I think everything else it does so well. I mean, the performances are so great. Anya Taylor-Joy is exceptional in this film. I think Chris Hemsworth is really good as well. This is one of the most unique roles I've seen him do. And it's actually a shame because in Furiosa's movie, despite me loving Anya Taylor-Joy so much in this movie, I actually think Chris Hemsworth steals the show here, which is a little sad to say, especially because thematically this is all about a woman kind of rising to her power and taking revenge against the men who have wronged her in her life. And the fact that the man who wronged her the most is the highlight when you leave the film and you're like, oh, that's the best part of it. It's a little icky, but I do think Chris Hemsworth is just so good. It's an undeniable performance. I think he shows so much range that you've never seen before from him. He gets to be a little goofy, a little silly, but he still has this gravitas and this fear element that he brings in all his scenes where you, the audience member, are fearful of what he's going to do next, even though he also is a bit of a clown, but also you understand why others take him seriously because you also kind of take him seriously. It's a really great performance, really great makeup on him to disguise him as well, because you kind of don't want to necessarily just show Chris Hemsworth as Chris Hemsworth, because then everyone's just going to kind of be thinking about all the other Chris Hemsworth they know. They're not going to be able to really buy him as a character, but because the makeup is so good, you're never once like, oh, that's Chris Hemsworth in makeup. It's just like, this is Dementis. This is this new character. I'm forgetting it's Chris Hemsworth. It's such a great chameleon of a performance where he really sinks into this role. And I did kind of breeze over her, but Anya Taylor-Joy is so good. This role doesn't have a lot of talking, as is true with Furiosa as Charlize Theron. And I think the shoes were big because Charlize Theron was really good as Furiosa, but it's a different take on the character in terms of subtle little things, but it still feels true to the nature of who the character is. And I think because she kind of finds her strength throughout the film, you start to see that growth of confidence, and that growth of anger and just determination as the film goes on from her, not just through the writing, but through her performance, which I think is really, really solid. And another performance I just wanted to highlight was Charlie Fraser, who is not in a lot of films. I just saw her for the first time in Anyone But You just a few months ago, the rom-com with Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney, and she was a great supporting role in that one. And then she starts off this film, she's Furiosa's mother, and her scenes in the beginning of this film are so good. She is someone who I think could have her own path as an action star and really kind of pave a way for herself in this genre, because she's just so badass, so just strong and mighty, and just she's such a force on the screen that it's just an infectious performance that I wish we got more of. But I think because she's only in it for a small amount of time, it's kind of the Mahershala Ali and Moonlight thing, where her presence is still felt throughout, which is really important. There are some other supporting players as well. There is one little other nitpick I want to bring up, and this is kind of actually relating to the most recent discussion on Alien Romulus. They do that thing that a lot of the franchise films now do, where they kind of resurrect a dead actor by using their likeliness and their face and their voice, and they use footage of them in other films to kind of recreate them in this film. In this case, it is Richard Carter, who plays the Bullet Farmer in Mad Max Fury Road. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and the Bullet Farmer does appear in this film, and it's credited as Lee Perry, the actor playing the Bullet Farmer, but instead they kind of do that CGI thing where they put Richard Carter's face on top of it. Now, I think the difference is the Bullet Farmer in this film plays a much smaller role than like the most recent example in Alien Romulus does. So it's not like this distracting front and center thing that they do. They also do a little bit of a CGI kind of recreation of the younger Furiosa with Aliyah Brown as the younger Furiosa. They kind of merge her face with Anya Taylor-Joy's to create this interesting hybrid. The thing with that is like both actresses are alive and they consent to it. And I still think Aliyah Brown's performance shines through despite a lot of the CGI work to make her look a little bit closer to Anya Taylor-Joy. It's an interesting technique. I don't necessarily think it was needed. I think you could have just had an actress playing young Furiosa without having to sell that it was, the same actress by using CGI and all that. But again, I appreciate George Miller for trying to take those swings with the CGI. I think, the dead actor thing, it's still icky. It'll always be icky to me, even if they get consent. I think they shouldn't have done it. And I think that is something that warrants real criticism. But I do think this kind of Furiosa CGI thing is just another way of like George Miller trying to like stretch his bounds and see how far he can go as a filmmaker and embrace these newer techniques. Because, he's been working for a little while, and we see this with a lot of directors like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, how they would continue to push themselves and adapt to the newer technology as it became available. And sometimes those swings miss and sometimes they hit. And that's the magic of watching these directors kind of adapt to this newer kind of way of filmmaking. I mean, if you look at Fury Road with this film, I mean, this one feels much more digital, much more CGI focused and less practical. There are a lot of great practical effects, of course, but Fury Road is so practical. You can really feel every ounce and every speckle of dirt, whereas here it kind of has this kind of glossy CGI look to it. But this is much more of your like fantasy kind of storybook like quality to this film that I think the CGI works a little bit better for in this sense. I think if you had these techniques in Fury Road, that would have made that film a lesser film. Though I would have liked a little bit more practicality in this film. I could at least see where the CGI was intentional here and giving it an overall different feel. Again, because you do have to distinguish this from Fury Road one way or another. And I think that's part of, trying to distinguish it, is give it a little bit more of a glossy CGI feel. I don't prefer that. I do prefer the aesthetic of Fury Road just a slight bit more. But again, it's like I said, a way of George Miller to kind of show how he's growing as a filmmaker. And while not everything necessarily works, I do think it's ambitious nonetheless, and we have to applaud someone who takes the big swings that George Miller does. I mean, these action sequences are going to hit so well, of course. Even if I think Fury Road hits higher heights with its action, I think the action here is still very engaging. But I will also say, I love how the climax of this thing is not an action fight. It is these two characters talking and discussing and sharing their points of view, their very different opposing points of view, and the bitterness from one character to another, and the just pity and despair and desperation from another character. It is just one of the craziest, coolest standoffs because it's unconventional. You would expect this big shoot 'em up finale, but instead they have this really like kind of simple standoff of just characters talking as the climax of this movie, which I think is just such a great choice. As I said, I don't think this film would ever fill the shoes of Fury Road. No film probably can, or very few films can. But I think for what it is and its own uniqueness of what it is, I think it works really, really well. So I really like this film. I think there's a lot of really great value to be had here. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I like it, especially when other films have come out this summer where I think they have taken those swings and missed a little bit of the time. I think here there's a lot of real artistic ambition that is woven throughout every single frame. Everything feels so intentional in creating this really, really evocative kind of Western revenge drama, which I really, really like, especially in pairing with Mad Max Fury Road. I can't wait now that it's streaming to watch the two back to back and really see how they flow well one into the next. And I do think this is going to flow really well into Mad Max Fury Road. And I think it's going to add a lot of great things to that film that were already great, but it's going to enhance that film even more. And that's kind of the best thing about a good prequel is the best prequels are the ones that make the films that come after it even better. And I think this is one of those films that is going to make Mad Max Fury Road even better when you watch it. And not just because it reminds you how great Fury Road is in the credit sequence. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed Furiosa, please let me know in the comments below. Even if you didn't enjoy it, let me know why in the comments below. I love the discussion. I think for a movie like this, even though it's a great movie and a lot of people have been talking about it, it didn't make a lot of money at the box office. So I hope a lot of people go out and see it. Again, Mad Max movies are not as big a sell as Star Wars and Jurassic Park, so I'm not totally surprised it didn't make a ton of money, but I hope now that it's available for more people and more people are able to see it and embrace it for all its glory, I think it's going to be quite a hit as the years trickle on. Maybe not quite to the heights of Fury Road, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. We got a few more reviews for you as part of this summer catch-up series. Friday and Monday, I'm going to kind of be doing like a little bit of a double feature in a way. I'm going to be starting the weekend off with one film and ending the weekend as we transition into the week with another film. And both those films have a common thread, and that is the breakout star of the summer, Mr. Glenn Powell. Friday and Monday will be my reviews for Hitman and Twister. Which one's going to come first? I still have yet to decide. So stay tuned Friday for either review of Twister or Hitman, and then stay tuned the following Monday for the review of the other. And then by then, we'll be in our final week of August, and we'll be kind of making our way to the end where I will reveal my top 10 films of the summer, which is going to be very exciting. That comes next Friday. So thank you guys so much for watching and witness this film and go check it out and let me know what you thought of it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.